rectal temperature. He had already had a glance at the body himself, and it looked as if someone had beaten or kicked the kid to death. The features were too severely damaged to reveal much except that he was a young white male. His wallet was missing, along with whatever keys and loose change he might have been carrying, and there was nothing else in his pockets to indicate who he was. It had probably started as a pub fight, Banks guessed, or perhaps the victim had been flashing his money about. As he watched Dr. Burns examine the boy's broken features, Banks imagined the scene as it might have happened. The kid, scared, running perhaps, realizing that whatever had started innocently enough was quickly getting out of control. How many of them were after him? 2, probably, at least, maybe 3 or 4. He runs through the dark, deserted streets in the rain, splashing through puddles, oblivious to his wet feet. Does he know they're going to kill him? Or is he just afraid of taking a beating? Either way, he sees the ginnel, thinks he can make it, slip away, get home free. But it's too late. Something hits him or trips him, knocks him down, and suddenly his face is crushed down against the rainy stone, the cigarette ends, and chocolate wrappers. He can taste blood, grit, leaves, probe a broken tooth with his tongue, and then he feels a sharp pain in his side, another in his back, his stomach, his groin, then they're kicking his head as if it were a football. He's trying to speak, beg, plead, but he can't get the words out, his mouth is too full of blood, and finally, he just slips away. No more pain, no more fear, no more anything. Well, maybe it had happened like that. Or they could have already been lying in wait for him, blocking the ginnel at each end, trapping him inside. Some of Banks's bosses had said he had too much imagination for his own good, though he found it had always come in useful. People would be surprised if they knew how much of what they believed to be painstaking, logical police work actually came down to a guess, a hunch, or a sudden intuition. Banks shrugged off the line of thought and got back to the business in hand. Dr. Burns was still kneeling, shining a penlight inside the boy's mouth. It looked like a pound of raw minced meat to Banks. He turned away. A pub fight, then? Though they didn't usually end in death, fights were common enough on a Saturday night in Eastvale, especially when some of the lads came in from the outlying villages, eager to demonstrate their physical superiority over the arrogant townies. They would come early to watch Eastvale United or the rugby team in the afternoon, and by pub chucking out time, they were usually 3 sheets to the wind, jostling each other in the fish and chip shop queues, slagging everyone in sight, just looking for trouble. It was a familiar pattern. "What are you looking at? Nothing. You calling me nothing?" Get out of that if you can. By midnight, though, most of the boozers had usually gone home, unless they had moved on to one of Eastvale's 2 nightclubs, where for a modest entrance fee you got membership, an inedible battered beef burger, a constant supply of ear-splitting music, and, most important of all, the chance to swill back watery lager until 3 in the morning. It wasn't that Banks had no sympathy for the victim. After all, the boy was somebody's son. But solving this case, he thought, would simply be a matter of canvassing the local pubs and finding out where Malado had been drinking, whom he'd been upsetting. A job for Detective Sergeant Hatchley, perhaps. Certainly not one for a wet detective chief inspector with Bizet's melodies still caressing his inner ear. One whose only wish was to crawl into a nice warm bed beside a wife who probably still wasn't speaking to him. Dr. Burns finished his examination and walked over. Burns did on-scene examinations when the local Home Office pathologist, Dr. Glendenning, was unavailable. He looked far too young and innocent for the job. In fact, he looked more like a farmer with his round face, pleasant, rustic features, and mop of chestnut hair. But he was quickly becoming conversant with the different ways in which man could dispatch his fellow man to the hereafter. "Well, it certainly looks like a boot job," he said, putting his black notebook back in his pocket. "I can't swear to it, of course. That'll be for Dr. Glendenning to determine at the post-mortem, but it looks that way. From what I can make out on first examination, one eye's practically hanging out of its socket, the nose is pulped, and there are several skull fractures. In some places the bone fragments might possibly have punctured the brain." Burns sighed. "In a way, the poor bugger's lucky he's